And every time I try to film something, it's always gloomy outside. I don't understand. I live in Southern California. What's going on, guys? My name is David Lee, back with another video. Switching gears a little bit, most of you have seen my videos from the Canon 80D series, things like beginning video making and the Canon 80D versus the A7S Mark II. I wanted to finish off everything I could with the Canon 80D before I moved on to my main cameras, which are the Sony A6500 and the Sony A7R Mark II. And this video is all about the A6500. It's going to be the best lenses for run and gun filmmaking. And why I chose to make this video is because that's really my style of filmmaking, is run and gun, guerrilla filmmaking. I do commercials, I do opportunities where there's like a studio environment or there's a set piece, talking head interviews, things like that where you can control everything from your lighting to your sound, acoustics, you know, the whole range. But sometimes you may find yourself where you don't have lighting, you don't have a studio or a room where you can film in. You're basically shooting either your own indie films, your own short films, maybe you're shooting a commercial outside for a skate park, for a fitness facility, or just like an outside venue, right, where you don't have control over any lighting besides where your camera is going to point. And the lens you have is going to play a critical role in creating the most filmic and most cinematic experience for your audience or for your client. I'm going to give you my top 2 lenses for run and gun filmmaking. These 2 lenses will cover pretty much most of the focal length, if not all the focal length, for run and gun filmmaking. Now again, this is my personal opinion, but this is based upon experience and also shooting for clients, as well as my own short films and documentary work that I do. Now I love these 2 lenses a lot, mainly because it's easy to travel with. If you're a documentary filmmaker, or especially run and gun filmmaking where you just need minimal equipment, you gotta go to your location and shoot whatever you can given your time frame. The last thing you wanna do is be hauling around all these lenses and your audio setup, your recorders, field monitor, right, cables. All these things come into play when you're trying to create your movie, your film, your video, whatever it can be. Well, let's get into it with the first lens, which is probably my favorite lens. And this is the Sony FE 28mm f2.0 lens. You can use this on full frame, Sony cameras, or even APS-C cameras. The reason why I like this one a lot is, especially on APS-C, like the Sony A6500, it mimics that like 40mm look, which you see a lot in films. You know, you could use a 40mm prime on a full frame lens, but since the A6500 is Super 35 only, you're pretty much stuck with, you know, certain focal lengths, whether you use a zoom lens or prime lens. Now why I like this a lot, besides it, you know, being 40mm, around that, 42mm, it's a odd focal length, yes, but you can do some pretty cool things with it. Regardless if you're shooting people, if you're shooting objects, or if you're trying to capture just a scene in general, such as, you know, if you're sitting back and you want a wide view of a coffee shop, maybe a street, anything like that. Now you have to be very creative with this lens, as it's not as wide as, say, like a 19mm or even a 16, 18mm. But that's a trade-off when you use a prime lens, is you physically have to move your body. But I think with guerrilla filmmaking and run and gun filmmaking, you're never really standing still unless you need like a lockdown scene on a tripod or a monopod, something like that. But your style of filming can differ. You may not move around as much as I do. I prefer to move around because it creates a more engaging and a more, you know, kind of like flowing and free action style of a video. Now, one other cool thing with the A6500 and this lens is you can use clear image zoom, which gets you a little bit closer to, like, I think 70mm or so. So say for the most part you have your 40mm or, you know, 28 equivalent of 42mm. But with clear image zoom, you can zoom in and close that gap. So, you know, instead of having to take off your lens and then swap on, say, like an 85 or 100, you can use the 28 and get just a little bit closer to that longer telephoto focal length. And at f2.0, this thing is super fast. It's super sharp as well too. I've used this for commercials, for talking head interviews, and again, running on filmmaking, making my own short films. And I usually go to this guy first, unless I need my second lens, which we'll go into right now. Now, the second best lens for running on filmmaking with the A6500 is going to be the Sony 18-105. For the cost, I think it still retails around $600, and I bought this lens brand new. But this thing honestly gets you everything you need. You know, you could go for like a 24 to 70, but you have 18, so it's a little bit wider than 24, and you have all the way to 105, which gets you to 157 millimeters in focal length. So with this guy, you're pretty much covered for everything you need. You know, is it as wide as say like a 10 to 18? No. But a 10 to 18 Sony may cost you, you know, around $700 to $800 or more, and you're only going to get, you know, 10 to 18. I will say, compared to the 28 millimeter, this lens is not as sharp. So if you're trying to film something where detail is very important to you, you may need to adjust some of the in-camera sharpening and also do some post-sharpening. But for the most part, 18 to 105, I don't think you're really going to be using this for like 90% of your up-close shots. If you need to, it's still there, right? It's available. You're going to get solid image quality. It may not be as sharp as say a 24 to 70 because that lens from Sony is like, you know, the glass is freaking huge, whereas this thing, the glass is, you know, the glass is like, it's pretty big, you know, but if you've seen or used the 24 to 70, it's like another circle around it. Another awesome thing about this is it has a power zoom, or almost like a servo zoom. So if you have it on a gimbal, such as like the Zhiyun Crane or even a Steadicam, you don't have to worry about rebalancing your gimbal, because when you zoom out, this thing does not move, the barrel stays still. Whereas something like the Canon 24 to 70, which I have here on my A7R II, if you have this on a gimbal or a Steadicam, if you need to adjust the focal length, then the barrel extends out, meaning you need to adjust your gimbal or Steadicam, which it's kind of a hassle. And especially if you're doing run and gun filmmaking, you know, you may only have like a minute to capture whatever you need to capture. And both these lenses, like I said again, are really lightweight. That's why I like using them, is when you are trying to pack your backpack or whatever you have full of, you know, gear, and that could be a lot of things, right? Everything from audio to external monitors, tripod, monopod, cables, lenses, filters, all these things. The more lenses you have, in my experience, you really only end up using like 1 or 2 of them, you know? There's been plenty of times where I've taken like 5 lenses and I ended up just using like 1 lens, you know, like the 18 to 105 or the 28 millimeter. But I think one last thing to mention is, you know, if you're truly doing like guerrilla filmmaking, sometimes having a big lens is not the best thing. And not because of like image quality or, you know, weighing you down. I don't really think those are really a big thing. But, you know, when you're going into places and locations where you really can't film, or as soon as they see something like, you know, they see something like this, they're gonna be like, oh, you can't film here. And that's happened plenty of times. Whereas if you have, you know, something like the A6500 with a lens like this, they may think that you're just, you know, a tourist taking pictures. And even the 18 to 105, it's a little bit big, right? But it's not like super huge like the 24 to 70. Again, they may think that you're just a tourist, you're taking pictures, maybe like a video for your family or something like that. There's gonna be times where you're gonna have to act like a ninja, you know, really, to be able to get the shot that you want. And I'll leave that up to you as far as, you know, what you decide to do. As I think we all have been there before. Sometimes there's a location that you really want to shoot in, and maybe you shouldn't be there, but you do it anyways because you get the shot, you get the location, and you create an awesome film or commercial, whatever it is. And if there's still something in your head thinking like, oh, should I use Sony lenses, or should I adapt to like Canon lenses or Nikon lenses, whatever kind of lens you may have. In my experience with the Sony A6500, I like using native glass. The reason why is because the camera is pretty small, so when you have like a heavy, you know, like I like the 24 to 70 Canon on my A7R II, just because physically it just feels good, you know. The camera is full frame, so it's bigger, which means there's more density, so that when you have a heavier lens on there, it feels natural. Whereas if you try to put something like, you know, like this big thing on top of an A6500, it just feels really front heavy, like extremely front heavy. So that's why I choose to use native lenses, and autofocusing on the A6500 is extremely good, you know. Not as good as like Canon dual pixel AF, but it really good. And I've done my own tests with using green mode with the Metabones Mark IV adapter, And I mean, yeah, it works, but the thing is, it's loud as hell when you use, you know, USM motors and even STM motors. You know, you can still hear like the clicking of the motor when it's trying to focus in. Your shotgun mic's gonna pick it up. The camera mic's gonna pick it up. You know, unless you have like, you know, a boom mic way up high, then it may not pick it up. Whereas with the Sony lenses, you don't have like the actual motor, the mechanical motors like going off. Good and bad, right? So I hope that helps you guys out. If you have any questions, again, leave a comment down below. My name is David Lee. I'm gonna see you guys in the next A6500 video.